Frank McCarron, 42 Rittenhouse Circle again. 2022 expenditures are budgeted to be $1 million more than eCounsult had forecasted. And my concern is whether this level of spending is sustainable. I would like to know if you have received the new 5-year forecast so that you can understand the effects of this level of spending going forward. I will concede that based on past budgets, you can make an educated guess that in 2022, the township won't spend all of the funds that it has been budgeted. Over the last 5 years, actual expenditures on a cumulative basis have been $3.8 million below budget. For 2021, the township budgeted $400,000 more in expenditures than eCounsult had forecasted. However, 2021 expenditures are now projected to be less than eCounsult had forecasted, approximately $500,000 less. So that's a $900,000 budgeting error in the township's favor. And it's not just expenditures. The township budgeted 2021 local tax revenues to be lower than eCounsult had forecasted. Instead, local tax revenues in 2021 are projected to be higher than eCounsult had forecasted, and that's a $500,000 budgeting error in your favor. Nevertheless, in 2022, the township is again budgeting local tax revenues to be lower than eCounsult has forecasted. So my educated guess is that revenues will again be higher than budget. So while I have a concern over the overall level of spending, history allows me to make an educated guess that you won't spend it. But my concern is more about 2023 and beyond. The township will use its 2022 budget as a starting point to prepare its 2023 budget. eCounsult did that in their 5-year forecast, growing expenditures by 3% a year. But by budgeting a $1.7 million shortfall in 2022, caused by expenditures exceeding revenues, even if it doesn't materialize, that will lead to a budgeted shortfall in 2023 north of $2 million. And at that level, it'll be hard for you to make educated guesses about whether your cash reserves at the end of 23 will be enough to go without a significant tax increase. And that's a problem. The township needs to be much more precise in its budgeting because the shortfall may otherwise grow too large to make educated guesses about tax increases. Now let's talk about the 5-year forecast. eCounsult had recommended that each year the finance director prepare a rolling 5-year forecast. One problem, though, is if the 5-year forecast will be prepared similar to the budget, namely understating revenues and overstating expenditures, and you are forced to extrapolate and make educated guesses about its accuracy, it won't be useful to you. Another problem, it could be even worse though, is let's say the 2022 budget is accurate, and your year-end 2022 fund balance is only $1.3 million. Then looking at a $2 million shortfall in 23, you have a significant issue with taxes to address. Therefore, I'm making some recommendations. I ask the town manager for 3 items next summer. First, a revised 2022 budget, including a reconciliation to what's being approved today, so you understand what's changed and why. Second, big picture items for 2023, some information for you so going forward you can decide directionally what you want to prioritize. And third, a status update on all the recommendations in the eCounsult report. Next year end, I would ask the Township Manager to prepare the 2023 budget based on the mid-year 2022 revised budget, not the budget being approved today. And that will also reflect the mid-year guidance that we will give to them. And at the same time as the 2023 budget is prepared, the Township Manager should ask the Finance Director to prepare a new 5-year plan. I want to talk about some big picture items though. 3 areas that show increases in 2022 over 2021 are fire, police, and capital expenditures. One of the concerns I have post-2022 is that I believe you will have to prioritize funding of emergency services, meaning fire, rather than police services. For the 2nd year in a row, you have not received a SAFER grant to fund the hiring of weekend firefighters. The deputy fire chief position was supposed to be funded by the SAFER grant. I don't know whether or not you have given up on getting a SAFER grant or you just can't wait any longer for a deputy fire chief. It seems to me that regardless of whether you get a SAFER grant this year, you should be planning for hiring weekend firefighters in 2023. Last year, I recommended that you reach out to Adam Selisker, who is the chairman of the Northampton Township Board of Supervisors and also their volunteer fire chief. Northampton Township received a grant in 2019 to hire weekend firefighters, and in 2020, Mr. Selisker helped Warminster Township get a $1.8 million SAFER grant to hire weekday firefighters. I had also recommended that the township hire a certified grant writer and speak with Brian Fitzpatrick's office. The only response I received at the time was that the hiring of an assistant township manager would obviate the need for a certified grant writer. I believe it's important to do all you can to get a SAFER grant, and I would strongly recommend you take these steps in 2022. And if it's okay with the fire chief, I would budget for the hiring of an assistant fire chief in late 2022, once the decision is known about SAFER funding. I'd also like to note that in Northampton Township's 2022 budget, they are applying for a SAFER grant to hire 10 more firefighters to have 24/7 coverage. So 24 hours a day, 7 days a week of paid firefighters. So the SAFER program is alive and well, you just have to figure out how to crack it. Also, eCounsult had projected that the Fire Protection Fund revenue would continue to grow slower than projected expenditures, operating at a deficit. So something has to be done to shore up this fund. I agree with the 2022 budget recommendation for the township to follow the precedent set by Northampton Township and spend $100,000 per year on stipends for volunteers. It seems to me that shoring up emergency services should be the township's priority. If you look at the 2022 budget detail for emergency services, that's accounts beginning with 01.411, the township's budget has been flat since 2020. The 2022 budget is only about $100,000 more than what was actually spent in 2020 or 2021. In contrast, the police department's budget is $1.1 million more in 2022 than was actually spent in 2020. I believe that this should be sufficient to shore up police services so we have adequate police coverage. eCounsult noted that statewide, police staffing is about 2 officers per 1,000 of population. Newtown Township was at 1.5 officers per 1,000 population, or 1.3 if Wrightstown was added. However, eCounsult also noted that locally, where there's less crime, some of our neighboring townships were closer to a 1.1 ratio. Northampton is at 1.1 with 44 officers for 40,000 population. Buckingham is at 1.1 with 22 officers for 20,000 population. Similar for Doylestown and Lower Makefield. So while we are not the state average of 2.0, it seems we are better staffed than some of our neighbors. And we should have flexibility to hold the line on future police hires in favor of emergency services. eCounsult also recommended that by the end of 2023, the township have a plan to form a regionalized police force that would encompass all of the Council Rock School District. If we have a ratio of 1.5 officers to 1,000 population, and Northampton has a 1.1 ratio, further hires may present a challenge in implementing that goal. Given eCounsult's recommendation and given our need for hiring emergency service firefighters, I believe you have to take a firm budgetary stand with regard to the police department, absent any offsetting revenues. I said last year that I thought Wrightstown had a good deal in terms of not having to bear pension costs under the contract for services for Newtown Township. I also said that the jointure gets a good deal by pushing commercial development into Newtown, which requires police, fire, and emergency services. But unless you can renegotiate with these townships, I believe the police department will have to operate on a tight budget. As for capital expenditures, the only thing I want to say is that eCounsult recommended that the finance director develop a multi-year capital improvement plan to be completed by the second quarter of 2021. And I don't know, but did this happen? Lastly, I want to finish up by talking to you about your finance committee. It seems to me that you're continuing to underutilize their skills by not making the finance committee an integral part of your budgeting process. If I were you, I would not want to see anything from the township manager on the budget that has not been reviewed by your finance committee. You know, you've had 3 chairpersons of your finance committee resign, and I just think that you need their help in achieving a much better budget. I will say, this is the end, but my last set of comments on expenditures in 2022. I said before that I'd like to see the police force hire an officer of color. And I don't know whether or not any of the 2021 hires have achieved that. But if not, I request that you earmark some funds so the police department has the budget to recruit and necessarily relocate an officer of color to make that happen. Second, I don't want to steal, I see some people from the EAC here, and I don't want to steal any of their thunder. But I know that they've been working on presenting you with 2 proposals on an LED conversion of lighting in the township. One of them through a company Nextera, they would pay the money up front and then earn it back through fees charged. And the second is through the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. And that may require, they'll do an initial feasibility study for nothing, but then the second phase would require $31,000 expenditure before it can be presented to you. And this is a significant item, and I certainly think that you'd be better off being presented with 2 proposals. So I don't know whether or not that $31,000 would have to be approved today for them to be able to do that, or they can just come next year and ask you for $31,000. But I don't think they should be precluded from having the option to present this to you. So, thank you.